This week's episode is sponsored by Blueberry.com. To get a free month of podcast hosting or analytics, enter number 2TD upon sign up for your free promotion.
Welcome everyone to our third episode of the Two Thumbs Down podcast. I am Luke here with Christian. So I guess before we get into our topic today, we wanted to thank everyone who liked and listened to the bonus exclusive podcast that we had a couple days ago, but just in general, just the first two episodes that we have.
We had an interview with Dan Peralt. If you haven't listened to it yet, he's the co-creator of American Vandal, and it went pretty well. It's been received great, so I appreciate you guys listening and subscribing. And with that being said, we're happy to keep doing more content. Let's get into this.
Yeah, definitely. And before that, obviously, give this a rating, good rating, preferably on iTunes. Go to the Facebook page, like it, ask us anything you want, questions for upcoming shows.
We love interacting.
Yeah,
with people,
definitely,
so
all that type of
shit.
shit.
Hit us up, for sure.
Anyway, so we watched Gerald's Game, which is yet another Netflix original and yet another Stephen King adaptation. And I guess it goes back to what we talked about 2 episodes ago, where it's like Netflix keeps pumping out original content, whether it's good or not. I guess that's what we're going to decide. But also, is it too much Stephen King adaptations?
I would say that I would agree with you if the content wasn't good. And most of it sucks. And we always say this. But Gerald's Game in particular was done really fucking well. I really, really liked this movie. And honestly, I'll say it, it was one of the best horror movies I've seen in the past couple months, especially newer horror movies.
Yeah. And I really enjoyed the director, Mike Flanagan, who did Hush, which, is that a Netflix original, or did they just put that on Netflix?
I'm not sure.
Okay, that was really good if you haven't seen that. That one is just like, essentially this deaf woman is terrorizing her house. It's almost like The Strangers, but with a deaf woman as the main
That was a
protagonist.
really tense movie. He has a great eye for tension.
Yeah.
I emailed him and I said this too. I was trying to get him to do an interview, but I think what he does so effectively is people alone, female characters alone in houses, and that's like his big thing. Even talking about houses, most of his movies are just set in a house, and that's it. He actually did, you know what else he did was fucking Oculus, dude. Have you ever seen Oculus?
Oh, okay, that came out, like, what, 3 years ago?
3 years,
like
I think
or 2.
2014 maybe?
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that wasn't horrible. Like I
liked
that.
it.
Yeah.
It was Oculus was about a haunted mirror, and it was really disorienting, which was cool for me. I liked that a lot.
So I guess going back to Gerald's Game, this is a novella or a book on by Stephen King.
It was written in Stephen King's period where he wasn't really widely acclaimed or received well by critics.
Okay.
And he did a series of books with feminist themes, and people just were not into it at all. And lately they've been getting a lot more esteem and whatever, but this is probably the first adaptation as far as Stephen King's period in that regard, and I think it was executed really well. Now, the director took a lot of licensing from the book. From what I understand, it's pretty different, but the movie on its own stands really well. The one thing that is similar to the book is the third act, which I'll get into, but for the first 2 acts, it's a really good original movie, let alone a Stephen King adaptation.
Yeah, it felt like, from the trailer, when I first saw it, it almost felt like, essentially, like, 50 Shades of Grey gone wrong, which is, like, how I thought, because I never read the book. And obviously, as always, with every episode we do when we review movies, this is, like, spoiler heavy, so if you haven't seen it, go watch it, and if you don't want to get spoiled, if not,
If you don't want to be spoiled, don't listen to the fucking podcast.
Yeah,
just do that instead.
You were warned, so let's just jump into it, shall we?
Yes. So the movie starts with, the character's name is Jessie. She's played by Carla Gugino. Gugino?
I think so, yeah, Gugino.
Whatever one it is, I'll pick that one and edit it. Gerald is played by Bruce Greenwood.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie opens. Both of them are in a relatively sexless marriage, I would say. Their marriage hasn't been working well for the past couple of years. We're not given too much context about it, but we open to them on their way to this lake house or just cabin, whatever, in the woods. And it cuts to a scene with a dog. There's a stray dog, and Gerald gets out of the car, and Jessie ends up feeding the dog a steak. Gerald is all upset about this. It's an expensive steak, whatever.
It was Kobe, man.
It was
made in Kobe.
$200 piece of Kobe beef.
Yeah,
I
man.
forgot about that. That was a big plot point.
Yeah.
Now, I can't quite figure out what the symbolism with that means.
What, with the meat?
Yeah. There's got to be some kind of foreshadowing with that.
I guess going back into it, like when he was eating...
Like the hand?
Yeah, the hand,
okay,
and,
sure, yeah. So later on,
yeah.
the dog ends up eating Gerald. That's a good point. That's probably what
and
that
her
means.
too.
Yeah.
Or tried to anyway.
Okay, sure, for sure.
Which is really even more interesting how he called the dog Cujo, which was like that was really interesting. Where it's like, oh, poking fun. I don't know if that was in the book or not, but like
that was cool.
Another reference to it. It's very meta in the Stephen King universe.
Yep.
So that was interesting. But yeah, Bruce Greenwood is like one of those actors that's like in everything, but you don't realize it.
Right.
Like
I could not get enough of him in this movie.
Yeah, right. He was a really good actor.
Great.
Like he was good in. He's almost good in almost like anything he's in. Honestly.
Great actor.
And he doesn't get. I don't want to say like thrown away. No one really knows who
Sure.
he is, but they've seen him in.
I'm
something
surprised
or
he's not a
another.
bigger name,
Yeah,
honestly. I mean,
definitely,
he's an excellent actor. He's very talented. And everybody, the entire cast of the movie, which does not consist of more than, I guess, like 2 or 3 people, but
Pretty much, yeah.
the cast, the acting is fucking phenomenal.
Yeah,
it's
and
so
like,
good.
it's like I told you this before we recorded. Like in the, I guess the first 2 acts, and I guess the third act too. It almost felt like because it was like you were saying, they tried to spice up their marriage in the bedroom, and it's usually pretty much where it takes place. And it felt like a play.
It
Which,
definitely did.
Which isn't a bad thing because usually plays they center on great acting, which it had great acting.
For sure.
And it didn't really. I don't want to say it had like not good film technical
It was
aspects.
unconventional. I mean,
yeah.
it was not your standard AAA film that you'll go see in a theater. It worked great in the Netflix format.
It almost felt like The Hateful Eight. You know how The Hateful Eight was?
12 Angry Men, that kind of thing.
It felt like it was like a play format.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
made into a movie.
For sure.
Essentially. So that's the one of the good takeaways I have from it. But I guess we get back into the plot.
So going
as you're saying,
forward,
back to
she
Kobe beef.
feeds the dog a $200 piece of Kobe beef. They arrive at the cabin or lake house or whatever. I can't tell if this was their place or they rented it. I guess it doesn't really matter.
I think it was him because he's like some sort of hot shot in
Yeah, he's a business guy.
real estate or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. Regardless.
And immediately they head to the bedroom. Gerald lays Jessie down and handcuffs her with high-grade handcuffs to the bedpost. You know, how you do.
Also takes probably more than enough Viagra to.
Kill a fucking horse.
Yeah, really.
He was popping that shit.
Yeah.
And he tries to play out this weird BDSM fantasy that he had going on in his head, and she was just not into it.
At least in the like she was in the beginning, but then it got I guess too real.
Got way too real for
Yeah.
her. So he's on top of her. He's trying to dominate her, and she was just not having this at all. She was not into it. She says stop. He says no. Then he tries to rape her. It fucks her up. And immediately after his attempted rape, he just suffers a heart attack out of fucking nowhere. That really caught me off guard. That was weird.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what was happening there.
I assume he just OD'd on the Viagra, right?
Can you OD on Viagra?
I mean, I know Viagra when it was like before it became a dick pill, it was used to, or it was supposed to be helping out with heart.
I can see
heart
how that
problems.
would be like a blood pressure thing. Like there's a lot of blood in your
and like
in your,
that's
in your
how
dick.
that's how it became a thing. Is like they were giving these like the clinical trials to older men with heart problems, and they found out that they all started getting boners. So there's like, yeah, like that's pretty much the whole background of Viagra. Like that's how it started. So
That's
like they're just like, we
awesome.
found a gold mine here.
That's
like
great.
fuck heart problems. Let's just take care of ED. So
That's really cool. I
Yeah.
did not know that.
so I imagine he just OD'd on Viagra because like we said, he was popping it like fucking candy.
Yeah.
So
So Gerald suffers a heart attack via Viagra.
yeah,
Let's assume.
essentially, yeah.
And immediately collapses to the floor. She is fucking distraught.
Yeah,
over this.
mainly because she thinks that he's still in the game.
Mind you, she's also reeling from surviving the rape that
Mm-hmm.
just happened, so she's just completely mentally fucked. And you don't really know whether it's a surreal kind of film choice or if that's actually happening in the movie, because I really like in movies where you can't trust the narrator, and you'll have that happen a lot. I believe it was Deus Ex Machina. There was an unreliable narrator. That's a big trope that I really
What, like
enjoy.
Ex Machina?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
Also, another example of that would be Mr. Robot,
Yeah.
where there's an unreliable narrator. So I was thinking, honestly, throughout most of the movie, my theory was that he had drugged her as part of his fucked up
Oh, like rape
fantasy.
fantasy, okay.
Yeah, and he drugged her, and this was her way of coping
Okay.
with what was going on.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was in my head, I was playing out what was actually happening, whether he was depriving her of the water or whether he was intentionally keeping her cuffed to the bed or hiding the key or keeping her phone away from her. I thought that he had drugged her, and I'm still not sure if that didn't happen.
Yeah. I don't know why. I also think that it goes back to, I guess, blocked memories that she had, which
Her repressed memories.
Plays
That was
more
a
into the
big part of this plot.
Yeah. So we'll get into that. But essentially what happens is after she feeds the dog and they go back into the bedroom, she left the front door open, which led to the dog coming into the room and essentially just feeding on him. Which she was she was trying to get him away from it, but I mean to no avail. She was handcuffed to the bed. She couldn't really do much, so he just like took a bite out of his arm and essentially kept doing it every so often.
Well, that goes back, at least for me, to his ability to build tension, the director. Because the first 20 minutes or so after Gerald collapses and dies, there's this scene where it's just her, and it's slowly getting darker outside. You can hear rustling in the bushes. You don't know if it's Gerald. Like I said, I thought that it was actually him, or I thought that maybe he had a bunch of friends coming or to rape her or do whatever. You don't fucking know.
Yeah.
And it's really scary because even like I talked about last week's episode where you don't see the witch and the Blair Witch, it was sort of similar to that because you don't actually see what's coming and you just have the shot of her face and you hear this rustling in the bushes and you hear these footsteps in the house. Mm-hmm. It's really tense.
Yeah, definitely. And it just turned out to be a dog.
It turned out to be a scary dog. And I think that dog is allegorical to something too because the dog looked different than a dog. I mean, its face was black. Did you notice that?
Yeah, it was like... I couldn't tell if it was a feral dog.
I don't know.
Because it was like a black face and it had like dark brown, like I guess, chest. Mm-hmm. And it had black on the back.
I thought that the dog...
It almost looked like a hybrid of a wolf dog.
Sure.
Pretty much.
Well, I thought that it symbolized her repressed memories or even herself as a whole. I thought that the dog was symbolic of what she was trying to overcome and how it was eating away at her, even physically almost.
Yeah.
You know, when Gerald had collapsed and the dog was eating her, I thought the dog was representative of what she was going through or what she overcome in the film.
I can see that, yeah.
You think so?
Yeah, no, that definitely seems like a good allegory.
Sure.
So essentially then she starts hallucinating, I guess the adrenaline of her being, seeing all this traumatic stuff.
Well, she lost her fucking mind. Yeah. She survived a rape attempt. Mm-hmm. Her husband died in front of her.
Yeah.
And now this dog just barges into the fucking house where she is convinced that there's going to be help. She thinks it's a person. And it's just this fucking dog staring at her, which is exactly why I think that it was a mere reflection of her.
Okay. Yeah, no, definitely. And then she just slowly delves into madness, at which point Gerald gets up.
Mm-hmm. That was scary.
Yeah. And I guess you find out, after she looks down on the ground, Gerald's still there.
You see this shot of her just going crazy. She can't figure out what's going on. She's trying to break free of these handcuffs. These handcuffs, again, I think are also symbolic to her not being able to let go of everything. I think there's a lot of symbolism in this movie.
Yeah.
Might be a bit heavy-handed, but it's definitely there. And you see Gerald's arm. Bang! Onto the bed. She's freaking the fuck out, but she's happy because she thinks he's not dead.
Yeah.
And for a couple minutes, you think he's not dead too, until you realize that his corpse is there on the floor, and she has lost her fucking mind. Yeah. She's going crazy.
Mm-hmm. And at which point, she has another visitor, which is her.
Herself.
Yeah. So you can say that it's her, I guess, left brain, right brain consciousness coming into effect.
Good and evil, like the left angel, the devil, angel and devil. And I think that was really illustrated where the depiction of Gerald, his ghost or whatever, how she depicted him to be in her mind when he was talking to her, was not the way that he would speak to her before he had died.
Yeah.
It was almost as if she was hearing her insecurities about herself when she was projecting upon herself, because in particular I thought the scene where he gets real close to her face and he says, "Do you remember that joke I told you?"
Yeah, I was just about to go into that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the life support with a cunt.
Yes,
essentially.
So throughout the first few scenes in the movie before he passes out, he was pretty caring and nice to her. And then he looks at her after he had died and came back to life. He looks at her and he says, do you remember that joke I was telling my friend at a party and you had overheard? And she's kind of hesitant, but then she says, yes, I do. And he says, well, what was it? And he says, a woman is nothing but life support for a cunt. Yeah. And that has to be symbolism. I don't know. I think the whole fucking movie is symbolic of just her, because she's the only character, if you think about it.
Yeah, essentially. And then he goes on to say, like, was that really me saying that, or was that just me essentially like piping up my customer? Because it was like a client-clientee situation.
So they put her through this mental torture, which again I think is her anxiety or whatever, trying to sort through all of this that's going on.
All the while, her good side, which was her, was trying to say, "Hey, look, you need to get out of here. You have
this shit doesn't matter. Get the fuck out.
Yeah, do something, anything. Like, your body survives X amount of hours without water, X amount of hours.
3 days without water.
And you're just laying there down from your adrenaline high, so you might as well do something instead of just sitting there trying to wake up your husband up. He's dead. Do something. Fight or flight, essentially.
So it starts to get dark at this point, and you don't know what's creeping and crawling outside. I watched this with 7.1 surround sound, and you can actually hear footsteps walking around the house, which is interesting because later on we meet the Moon Man, and I think he was creeping around the house.
Right.
I think they added that in intentionally. So it's getting dark now. And one more thing I should point out before I get into this is that when he was assaulting her, he kept referring to himself as daddy.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was doing that or if she was hearing that, because she had a big problem with her dad later on in the film.
Okay. Yeah. Because he wouldn't have known that.
Right.
Obviously. Because we'll get to that later. But yeah, that makes sense that it was her. I mean, or it just might have been him just being a weird
Just being a fucking
dude.
weirdo. Yeah, sure.
Like, you can see both ways, but at the same time, I think it was probably just him being a fucking weirdo.
Yeah. I think it's left open to interpretation. A lot of this movie is. It's pretty ambiguous.
Oh, yeah.
Now, there was a really cool scene where she becomes just fucking parched. She's super thirsty, and she becomes hyper aware of her surroundings. She can't move her fucking hands. She's looking around. How do I get out of this? I need water. I need water now. And her good self kept telling her or coaching her how to get this water. And then she realized that Gerald had set a cup of water on the shelf above her when he was taking his Viagra. And she was able to push the water down. That was a really, really excellent scene, how she pushed the water down and was able to take the water. That cup was one of the best characters in the movie.
Yeah, and then also how, like, when she finally had it in her hands, she couldn't reach it because it was too far. So she essentially made a straw.
She made a straw out of the tag on her slip.
Okay, because I was trying to figure out what that was. So yeah, she made a straw out of the tag on her dress, and then just used. That was really MacGyver-ish. I guess, yeah.
And that cup played a bigger role later on in the film too.
Yeah, it really did, and it was almost like this whole rape fantasy was leading up to her overcoming the problems later on in the film. Like, it was almost like it was a blessing in disguise.
Absolutely. I mean, not that it was a blessing to be raped, but what happened to her allowed her to overcome and quite literally break free of her bondage.
Yeah, definitely. Where were we? Yeah, the water. So yeah, she gets the water, and then she's like, okay, well, I've quenched my thirst for a while. I might as well still try to figure out how the fuck I'm gonna get out of this. In which case, the first visit of the Moon Man. Let's go into that.
So we are introduced to a character who is probably one of the more frightening characters I've seen lately in a horror film. His face is contorted to the max. I mean, he looks like...
You know what he reminded me of? He reminded me of the vampires in, what was the Will Smith movie?
I Am Legend?
Yes.
I thought he kind of looked like that, or Nosferatu.
Yeah, okay.
Sort of, yeah. Or kind of like Gollum on a bad meth bender.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like the creators in Prometheus.
I thought you meant the director of Prometheus.
Oh, no.
That's just how they looked?
No. Like,
okay.
They were the creators of mankind in Prometheus / Alien Covenant.
I haven't sat through that movie. I've heard it's pretty good. Is it good?
Alien Covenant?
Prometheus.
It's a good movie. It doesn't fit relatively well into the Alien ethos.
I heard that.
I liked Alien Covenant, though.
Yeah, you said that.
So, another podcast, another time.
Moon Man.
Moon Man.
So, he looks like a fucked up Gollum. Or almost like a Dungeons and Dragons-esque ghoul, if you will. And he's holding a chest of all these jewels. And he doesn't have a single line of dialogue except at the end of the movie. And he presents to her this chest. And I'm assuming we are to infer that he wants something from her.
It was almost like Karen
Karen?
Who's the person you give your stuff to before you entered into the River Styx.
Oh, shit. Yeah, maybe that was allegorical to like Greek mythology kind of stuff.
That's how I figured, because he had that, it was, what'd she say? She said it was a bag of bones.
Bag of bones.
And he had all this interesting things inside.
Good shit.
So,
yeah,
maybe,
for sure.
Okay, maybe that was...
Okay.
There was that. She called him, the man in the corner, because she still couldn't figure who the hell it was. So she was visited by him. She was freaked the fuck out. And at which point, then it's daytime, and back to her good and evil people going on.
Doesn't do anything to her. He just kind of stares at her and then leaves.
Yeah, so back to her being more even, like, freaked out that she's by whatever his name was.
She's super fucked up at this point. Her madness in the movie is slowly delving into this just insanity. I mean, it's so fucking surreal and weird and out there. Not to Mother levels, but it's weird, right? And you don't know what the fuck's going on. Now you don't know if there's like this paranormal element to it, which from what I understand, there is a paranormal element to it in the book. Mm-hmm. We're not really introduced to that in the movie, which I'm kind of glad, because I think that the movie was already good enough in and of itself, and adding that element might have kind of extrapolated some.
And like I said before, like when we were talking about it, like Stephen King, he's a weirdo. Mm-hmm. He's like probably one of my favorite authors, but he's a weirdo in the sense that he'll put stuff like that. Like even with it, when I'm talking about
just
like
shit that's totally out of left field.
Like the turtle Maturin, who sidebar, but you know how in the Dark Tower, how that movie was really bad. Essentially, Maturin is a guardian of the Dark Tower.
Really?
So it and the Dark Tower are fucking one in the same, almost. You know what I mean?
Do his books take place in the same universe?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't think so.
Huh.
But
we give it a Google.
I could definitely do that. Back to the next day.
So now we're at day 2. There was a really cool part of this film where she wakes up because she just falls into this awful sleep where she can't possibly keep her eyes open any longer, and she is coerced into sleeping by Gerald. And herself, let's say, kept telling her, don't sleep, don't sleep, don't sleep, don't sleep, and she does. And then she wakes up and sees the moon man. We don't know if it's a nightmare, but then she wakes up after this happens, and now it is daytime.
Right.
Her arms are fucked. I was thinking about this as I was watching the movie. Can you imagine sleeping completely, both arms, your entire wingspan, tied to the bedpost, all your weight is on them, and you wake up hours later? I mean, she had no circulation.
Essentially,
you're
crucified.
Yes,
when you think about it.
Right. She was fucked up. I mean, she could barely move. She was able to regain circulation by pedaling her legs on the bed. It was really interesting. It was really dramatic. That was done beautifully. I really enjoyed that. So now we're focusing on how to get out of these handcuffs. But before we do that, are these books connected?
I did some Reddit digging, and there's a huge flowchart made by Tessie Girl. Yes.
They are. Just yes, that's the answer?
This is a lengthy fucking flowchart of how...
Now, is this fan theory or is this canon?
This is from a archived Reddit post. The commenter Leower says, yes, most of his stories are set in the same area or reference the same places. There are also references to other characters in his book. For example, in Apt Pupil, the main character talks about Andrew Dufresne, the main character of Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption. There are really some awesome charts by fans that try to... like we just said.
Awesome.
Yes.
We'll link that in the description.
Also, they all take place in Maine.
Yeah,
if you think about it.
Right?
Yeah, Derry, Maine, or some form or another. Mm-hmm. So, yes.
Cool.
Okay.
So you have to wonder if this one is also connected to everything else.
In the book, it probably has more heavy-handed references. Like I said, with the Cujo reference. Mm-hmm. I don't think that might have really done anything.
Sure.
But anyway.
Okay. So she wants out of these fucking handcuffs. Cannot figure out how to get out of them. We actually we're given a vision that she's going through of her just having this badass moment where she's able to break down the bedpost, she's able to call her, she's able to get the fuck out, and everything's good. Mm-hmm. Turns out that's not real. She's losing her mind.
Hallucinating.
Delving into insanity, deeper and deeper into madness, and now she's just into oblivion. She has no idea what the fuck is going on. We don't have any idea what the fuck is going on as a viewer, which I thought was cool because you kind of related to her madness from a third-party perspective. That was cool. That was really interesting.
And it also, going back to, whenever Gerald and her other self, the good self, was talking about, you didn't get out. Look, you're still there.
You're fucked. Yeah, you're still here.
The other good self of her talks about, this isn't the worst thing that's happened to you. What about your dad?
Right.
And to which Gerald goes, what are you talking about? And she's like, nothing happened. Don't worry about it. At which point she then begins to fall asleep. Like, don't fall asleep. You're going to...
That's where that part happened. Okay.
Yeah, at which point then in a flashback scene with her family at a separate lake house.
at this point, not to interject, but at this point, I would say the movie cranks up its intensity times 10 fucking thousand.
Yeah.
And it tackles a few topics, really, rape, mental health, and now sexual assault that you don't see in a lot of movies.
Yeah, no. Like I said, how this is the first act, I guess that this flashback probably go into the second act. The first act felt like a play in the sense of one room, minimal characters, and then at this point it turns into more of a movie.
Yeah.
Where it's a different location, different characters, actors. There's more visual effects going on because at this point you find out that they're at this lake house for the eclipse, or they just happen to be there.
I think they went for the eclipse.
Okay,
because
because they had like the glasses and shit like that, yeah. So yeah, they were there for the eclipse. Before the eclipse happens, you find that her mother and father are arguing because
we're introduced to a young version of Jessie.
Yes.
And she is incredibly affectionate towards her father and pretty distant towards her mother in this flashback.
Yeah.
Now, mother and father are arguing over this, and we're given a little bit of context as to what's going on. Now, we jump to a scene where she was on a bench by herself, and her father comes up to her, sits on the bench, and they're there to watch the eclipse. This eclipse changed her life.
Yeah.
It
in more ways than one.
destroyed her.
Yeah.
Now, the father looks at her, and this whole scene is not scary in the sense of a conventional horror aspect, but it's terrifying in the sense that this happens to people every day.
Yeah.
Now, he looks at her and he says, "Will you sit on my lap like you did when you were a little girl?" And she's
at which point I was like, oh God.
You know what's going on. You know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it does. She's a bit apprehensive, but finally she agrees. She sits on his lap, and he fucking rubs a big one out on her.
Yeah. You know.
How you do. Well, it was just so casual for him. And it makes you wonder if that happened to her many times.
Yeah.
And that was the one time that she thought about it because he just didn't think twice.
Yeah, now that she's like starting to become a woman.
Right. Sure.
You know, now that it's you know.
It was really graphic how they didn't show his dick, but they showed him masturbating.
You knew what was happening.
It was disgusting.
Yeah.
The whole scene was fucking, it was gruesome.
Yeah.
And this whole movie has a few scenes like that where it's just so fucking, it's too real almost. Yeah. So we get to see her sexually assaulted by her father. Later on in another flashback, we see her father trying to convince her, never speak of this again. If you speak of this again, it's going to destroy me. It'll destroy everything. Your mother will think it's your fault.
But then he's like, maybe we should tell her.
Manipulating her.
Yeah.
Right? And she carried this with her up until this point, and I don't think, at least from the context that we're given of the film, that she had thought about this, right? I think it fucked her up so bad that she just buried it and kept it where it belonged, and she couldn't face it. She didn't know how to deal with it, and finally she's in a position where she can overcome this.
And it's like it was a similar situation.
Definitely.
Yeah, so that's why it's like, oh, how am I going to get out of this? Oh, well, I got out of that situation.
Sure.
How did I get out of that situation in order to get out of my current situation?
This chick has been through the fucking ringer.
Yeah,
She's
definitely.
been through it.
Mm-hmm. So she gets out of the flashbacks, at which point then she has to still fight this dog off literally because now it's going
The dog had been chewing on her foot.
Yeah, so she kicks it away and I guess goes back to Gerald. At which point, is there another visit by the Moon Man?
Well, the dog that was chewing on her foot is actually depicted as the Moon Man, and then it flashes into the dog, it turns out. But
yes, okay, yes, now I know. Yeah, so yeah, that happens. At which point then she now realizes that her arms are so weak that
she can barely move.
Yeah, it's like she's been there for, I think they said almost like 3-4 days, something like
fucked.
that. Yeah, so she now has to think of a plan real quick. And she says, I guess the good self says, you've had the tools all along.
This is where the cup comes back into play.
She makes this remark about cutting herself. And she says, if you cut the wrists, you won't bleed out that long.
This scene is crazy.
Yeah, and she's like, the good thing about this is blood is like oil. It's like slippy as hell, essentially what she says.
Slippery, Western Pennsylvania.
Whatever, fuck off. So essentially she then takes that cup again, breaks it into her hand, and then just like slits her wrist.
Just talking about this scene, my fucking skin is crawling.
I've seen a lot more goriness in like horror movies, but this one just it just takes the cake because it's like she's cutting her wrist but she's also pulling.
They show
so you can see the skin come back. You can almost
tendons.
You can see tendons and muscles. You can almost see the skeleton of her hand as she's pulling it out of the handcuff.
She rips her hand out. The flesh actually goes over her thumb all the way up her hand, almost like a glove.
Yeah, it would be literally like a glove.
If you're going to watch this movie, I highly suggest being prepared for this scene because I wasn't. I didn't know it was coming.
I wasn't either. I literally when I was watching it, I literally yelled out, "Jesus fucking Christ!"
Hell yeah, dude.
Like that was akin to 127 hours, but a lot worse.
That intensity, especially in that scene, was just fucking to the max. It was too much for me.
I'm trying to remember if there was any musical tension to go along with it. I don't think there was.
There was not much of a score. I think they had a little bit of ambient music going on. There was a few spots where there was string instruments happening.
Yeah.
How you have in horror movies. You'll have the high-pitched violin note.
Yeah.
Aside from that, there wasn't really a theme going on for a score. No. Like you said, it was mostly a play. She rips this shit off of her fucking hand.
Yeah.
And using the blood as a lubricant. It was fucking repugnant. But it was done really well.
Yeah.
I mean, the effects were unbelievable.
Yeah.
It looked incredibly real.
And it needed to be done.
Usually gore in horror movies kind of comes off almost comical to me.
Which we'll get into our second part of our podcast. But
This was serious. And the whole movie takes itself very seriously. And it works.
Yeah.
So she rips her fucking hand off, basically. Immediately is able to get to the key, remove the handcuffs.
With her mouth, because she couldn't even move it with the hand.
Right, her hand was so fucked up.
She essentially used, maxi pads in order to
bandage her hand.
Because there was nothing else,
There was also a cell phone. Gerald's cell phone was
yes.
set on the nightstand, and she went for that at first, and the phone was dead. I think they could have taken the phone out of the movie. I should have mentioned this earlier in the podcast. I just wasn't thinking about it because it was so almost irrelevant to the film. Every piece of furniture, every electronic device, every cup, phone, handcuffed, everything in that movie was a character.
Yeah, it seemed to be so out of reach. You know what I mean? Just that close.
I guess maybe it was in the movie for that aspect, just to build tension, but I felt like the phone, especially because it had no resolve.
Yeah.
Oh, she gets to the phone, it's dead. Whatever.
Yeah, and at which point, that's what I was talking to you about. It was like, well, couldn't she have just done the Hey Siri thing? But in the terms of
if it was Gerald's phone, Siri would have only responded to his voice.
Yeah, okay. Well, then that point has been retracted.
Sure.
Okay, so she opens the key with her mouth, at which point she then starts to walk towards the exit. The dog is freaking out, so I'm assuming the Moon Man's back. He goes and hides in the bathroom, at which point she then passes the fuck out from blood loss. And because her legs she's been sitting for, 5 days, so she's not, the legs have to remember to walk again. So she passes out right on the dead body of Gerald, who you see is just gross, his face is eaten away and decaying and absolutely disgusting.
That's what I was saying earlier. I mean, the effects in this movie were so fucking good. There was no Michael Bay explosions or anything, but the gore, I guess more the makeup department should get props for this. I mean, it was done so well.
Yeah, it definitely was. So, yeah, she wakes up, the dog is eating her or eating Gerald again? I think
eating
it was
Gerald
eating
again.
Her. Okay.
It took his hand.
Yeah.
She frees herself from these handcuffs. She gets in the car.
Well, before that, she had to...
Oh, shit.
Pay the toll, essentially. That's how I said the Moon Man was
the
allegory
Moon Man was back.
Yeah.
The Moon Man came back, and she had to give him her ring, and he left her alone.
That's what I was saying, the allegorical to Karen, the guardian of the River Styx.
Gotcha.
That's why when people, in the old days, they put pennies over their eyes, not only to keep them closed, but in order for them to pay Karen when they go to the River Styx. That's how I pictured it.
Really interesting.
Yeah. So she gets out of the house.
She gets out of the house, and she gets in the car. And we're now led into one of the best scenes in the movie, where she's driving, and it has this element of just surreal fucking strangeness going on, where she's driving this car. The Moon Man is now in the back of the car, and we see the eclipse from her childhood.
It was blood red.
She's driving as fast as she could. The sky, the hue of the sky is increasingly getting more and more red, almost symbolic of blood or her past or whatever. And the sun is immediately covered up by the eclipse. The first line that the Moon Man has in the movie, and he says, "Mouse," and she wrecks.
Which was her pet nickname that her dad gave her.
We are not really told what happens at this point. We see some people coming out of the house. We know she's okay. And here's where the movie gets weird. It turns into a Lifetime movie at this point. The third act of this movie, I mean, you seem to like it, but I just... It was... I thought it was bad. The last couple minutes of this film, it was shoehorned in there. Did not need to be in there.
Did you read anything like of the book?
I didn't read the books.
So was that part in the book?
The last act of this movie was in the book.
What's the point of view of the book? Is it from her, or is it like an omniscient
I believe
narrator?
it's from her. I believe it's from her.
Okay. So essentially, like how she does it at the end.
From what I understand, the first 2 acts, the director took a lot of licensing. The last act of the movie, you can tell, is definitely straight from the book. It probably worked okay in the book. For me, it fell short.
Yeah.
After she wrecks, the next scene is her with a bandage on her hand. How the fuck does her hand still work?
She probably had like a shit ton of surgeries.
You're right. She did mention that she got a bunch of skin grafts and stuff.
Yeah, she had to call the police. She had to deal with his company because they said, we can't release this information of how he died. So they probably paid for all her medical bills, I would imagine. Like
there was an insurance payout?
Yeah, so she had an insurance payout, in which case,
Probably covered a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
She's writing a letter with her bad hand, and it is revealed to us that there was a grave robber in New Orleans, where her and Gerald were from. And this man would go around, he would dig up graves, and he would take jewelry from these corpses, essentially.
Yeah, he was called the Crypt Creeper?
Whatever,
Yeah, that's what it was dubbed, I guess.
And as she's writing this letter, it is revealed that that person was the Moon Man.
He also, I guess, the reason why nothing happened to her was because I guess that he, in his, I guess, later stages of what he was doing, he would start to have sex with the bodies, and in which case he would then graduate to only doing it with the male bodies, which was probably why nothing happened to her, because he was probably
I must have
having
missed
sex
that.
with
I
Gerald.
couldn't figure out why he didn't touch her. But it turns out the Moon Man was real. And she said the dog was real, too. I don't think the dog was real.
He suffered, what was the name?
It was some fucked up medical disease that made his face all contorted.
Yeah, like it's a thyroid condition. It started with an A, like made like gigantism, essentially.
Yeah.
So she goes into his arraignment, because like you find out that okay, like I'll give you that. Okay.
Oh my god, this is so goddamn dumb.
I'll give you that. That part I did not like.
What the fuck?
But you find out that the letter she's writing is to her younger self. That's not the part I didn't like. She goes to his arraignment, and he's being arraigned. They said there's no cameras allowed in the courtroom. She goes in there, and she just walks right up to the judge's bench and goes, what, hey? He turns around, at which point she starts to see him, she starts to see her dad, she starts to see Gerald all in one flashback.
She says some stupid-ass line.
Fuck, I don't remember.
It was like, I can overcome this.
Yeah,
it was something ridiculous.
It was like, I win, or something like that.
Yeah, it was so bad. It was so bad.
At which point he then, breaks out of his handcuffs.
He breaks out of his cuffs.
And he looked like he's going to hug her or something. And then he just gets...
and then he's yelling, "You're real! You're real!" And she turns around and walks out. Nothing happened. You would be so fucked if you interrupted a court proceeding.
Especially one as famous as this.
Right.
I would imagine.
That destroyed every ounce of immersion I had in this movie. I was already a little weird once that third act came around. And then when she went into the arraignment and just starts fucking with this guy, that was so stupid.
I will concede to you on that one.
That was dumb
I didn't
as
like
hell.
that. Everything else from that movie was good. It wasn't perfect, but it was good. And then essentially she just walks off into the sunset.
She walks off into the distance, and that's it.
And then what she lets her younger self read the letter she wrote.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and she also starts a foundation
Yeah.
for people who have been sexually assaulted, and we are led into a scene where she's helping people.
Mm-hmm. At which point she then she says she stayed up all night waiting for the Moon Man to come back, and at the end of the movie he doesn't. So
that's it.
Boom.
Weird ass ending.
Roll credits.
So give it a letter grade.
I don't know about letter grade, but
Out of 10.
6.9.
Give it a Rotten Tomatoes score.
79.
Give me a Roger Ebert out of 5.
3.2. 3.5.
3.5?
Yeah.
I'm going to give it a B minus.
Okay. That's pretty much how I figured it too.
Yeah.
If I had to give it a letter grade.
Okay. So that's Gerald's Game.
Yeah. Is it too much Stephen King, honestly? Because there's another Stephen King book movie coming out on Netflix. It's called 1932, 1922, which that looks very interesting as well.
They have so much content to work with his work. I mean, he has released an insurmountable amount of books.
really crazy how it's insane, and I don't know how he just keeps pumping I don't think he's doing it now.
He's put out an innumerable. Is it innumerable or insurmountable?
I don't know, but it's a lot.
It's a lot
about
of fucking
a
books.
shit ton,
A shit ton.
And it's not like these books are
bad.
Yeah, he's written novellas and short stories, which is what that newer one, 1932, is a novella. If you look at it, that's a fucking tome. Under the Dome is as big as, like, it's thick as shit. I don't know what Gerald's game is.
The Mist was a short story, wasn't it?
I think so.
The Mist, I enjoyed that movie.
The Dark Tower, that's a whole fucking book series.
Right.
Like, I mean...
he's a fucking wizard.
Yeah, it's crazy. Mm-hmm. And he didn't really go to school for that, right? He just a weird dude. Like, he just wrote, like, he's the master of the macabre.
His son, Joe Hill, he writes under the pseudonym Joe Hill. He wrote Horns. I don't know if you've seen Horns.
Yeah, with Daniel Radcliffe. That wasn't a horrible... Yeah.
Pretty good film.
And I know he wrote... Did he help write the Shining sequel, Dr. Sleep?
I'm not sure. I do know that he wrote a book that I read pretty recently called Heart-Shaped Box. I really enjoyed that book. It was about a...
Nirvana?
You would think so, but it was kind of a reference to Nirvana. The guy was this washed-up rock star guy, and he was into, like you said, macabre stuff. He really he had like a collection of like snuff films and all kinds of weird shit.
Yeah.
And he orders this supposedly haunted suit off of Craigslist, and it gets dropped off, and this ghost comes and haunts him, and it's pretty good too.
That's cool.
Yeah. His son, pretty good writer. I really enjoyed his son's work as well, so check that out.
I guess it begs the question, though. I guess if we had to say, is it too much Stephen King? Especially now, because it's like, what? It, Dark Tower, 1932, Gerald's Game. Under the Dome TV series, it was really bad. The first season of it was good because it was really along the lines of the book, and then after the first season, it just turned to shit, which is why CBS canceled it. 11/22/63 on Hulu, that was actually really good. With James Franco. That was
so
really
probably
good.
50 or 60% of it is pretty good.
Yeah, the guy that...
Then I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I am too, but like it's...
it's a lot.
Andreas Machete, who did It, wants to do a reboot of Pet Sematary.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is another
honestly, at this point, I'm just happy that horror movies are getting a resurgence, and this works really well with our Halloween series that we're...
Would you consider this horror? I mean, I would to an extent. I wouldn't say it's 100% horror. I'd say there's thriller aspects to it, but I'd say it's like almost 50-50 down the middle horror.
I'm going to say this, and people said this about Gone Girl, and I'm going to say it about this movie too.
Gone Girl.
Yeah. If this movie was on Lifetime, it would be the best Lifetime movie ever made.
Okay.
As far as an actual movie,
Oxygen.
It's sure.
The Oprah Winfrey Network.
They all have that like strong female lead.
Yeah, 50 Shades of Grey gone wrong.
Right.
I mean, like there's nothing wrong with it, but yeah, okay.
It was a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's a horror movie, but there are definitely elements of horror in it.
Yeah.
It's a woman overcoming some horrible shit. She gets through it. The end. Not your typical hero's journey.
No.
I thought it was different.
Yeah.
And I definitely recommend it. Give it a watch.
Yeah, definitely. So when you're...
Although, one more thing.
Yeah.
The font of the movie on the poster on Netflix, you'll see it says Gerald's Game. It's written in the Game of Thrones.
What, this?
No. Actually, yeah, right there on the poster. You'll see, it's the same font that they use for Game of Thrones, and it really fucking put me off, and I skipped over it until I saw the reviews, and it's supposed to be pretty good.
Yeah, I don't know what font. It looks like Gothic type of font. Yeah. Whatever. Okay.
Whatever. I don't know. The poster's bad, but...
So, whenever you're done binge watching Stranger Things or whatever, what have you, give this a...
Check this one out. It's good.
So, all right.
So, that was heavy. What we're going to be talking about now is one of my favorite movies, Cabin in the Woods.
And before we go in, this is our picks that we're doing for the Halloween month.
We're doing a Halloween series, so we each picked a movie. I picked Cabin in the Woods because I think it's at least one of my favorite. I don't know if you could even call it a horror movie, but
yeah,
it's a good fucking movie.
Well, because it definitely goes in on the tropes of all the horror movies. It's like a parody, but also claims its own right of a great movie. Honestly, in terms of horror, excuse me.
It was directed by Josh Whedon, who is, if you're familiar, I'm sure you are if you're listening to this podcast.
Well, he wrote it. He didn't direct it.
Oh, excuse me. He wrote it. Who directed it?
Drew Goddard.
Yeah. Okay, so Whedon wrote it, and you either love him or you hate him.
Yeah, really.
Honestly, I'm kind of indifferent. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the Marvel movies. Mm-hmm. Personally, I feel like every single Marvel movie has the same color scheme. The music tells you how to feel. They all have the same plot, and I love the comics. I mean, I grew up with the comics.
Yeah.
But I don't know. There's just something there that I'm not digging. And I don't like the DC movies either. I mean, that Batman versus Superman shit.
Oh, no, that was really bad.
That was really bad. I mean, that
think
was super duper
Marvel
bad.
does it better. by
Yeah,
far.
definitely,
if you're
definitely
coming
does it
from
better.
someone that loves superhero movies.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
But yeah, no, I think Cabin in the Woods, like in terms of like non-superhero movies, I think this is one of his best because I've never really watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer. In terms of Joss Whedon. But Drew Goddard, he directed he didn't direct World War Z, but he wrote it, which is good.
Yeah, that was good. I like the
but-
book too.
Yeah, I think that the book was better.
Yeah,
obviously.
for sure.
But yeah, I mean, Drew Goddard's not a bad filmmaker. I mean, he's won an Academy Award.
Honestly, this movie, Cabin in the Woods, I think really set the trail for Chris Hemsworth to become Thor, and now he'll never be anything other than Thor.
No, not
He's
even
just
close.
fucking Thor.
Yeah, I mean, every single movie he's been in, he'll always be Thor. Pretty much. I mean, it's just like, it's crazy.
He's
but,
just Thor now.
and it's the same thing with almost all those superheroes. You know, Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, even though Chris Evans played multiple superheroes, but now he's only Captain America.
He'll never not be Captain America.
And I mean,
he does a great job.
Yeah, and they'll live off that for the rest of their lives.
hell
Honestly.
yeah,
Especially Robert
dude.
Downey Jr. Robert Downey Jr. made like $100 million a movie. So
Fucking
it's
right
like,
he does. I mean, he has money.
yeah, especially now that like he like turned his life around and stuff. Like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, he's one of the great.
Which is
He's one of the
cool.
good ones.
I mean, he's no longer known for being a mess, and now he's got his shit together.
Yeah.
He's an A-list fucking actor.
Yeah,
I mean, you see him in a movie, you're like, holy shit, right?
Yeah.
I think he does a great job at being Iron Man.
Almost won an Academy Award in blackface.
Yeah, Tropic Thunder.
Yeah,
dude.
especially
I love that movie. I
Yeah,
watched
that
it
movie's so
recently.
good. That movie's so good.
Oh my god! Did you know? Okay, so here's a little quip. He has a line in that movie, in his blackface, where he says, "I don't get out of character till I do the DVD commentary."
Yeah.
And he does the DVD commentary in character.
No.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's so awesome.
I have that movie. I've never watched
Listen
the DVD.
to the commentary.
Okay.
He does it in character.
Good. That makes me happy in my heart.
Yeah, that movie's funny as hell.
Yeah. But yeah, in all honesty, like Cabin in the Woods has it's not like they like play the tropes to make. I mean, I guess they would play those horror tropes to make fun of it, but at the same time, they do it so well that it's like
It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
It's
it doesn't
great.
matter.
It
It's a
works.
great movie. Yeah. And there's
I was saying this earlier, but Cabin in the Woods is everything that the scary movie, the scary movie series wanted to be.
yeah.
And it does it 100 times better, and it's actually scary in some points.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take itself seriously. It's still funny. It's a great fucking movie.
Yeah, especially the ending when it was like serious. I guess at the end where
Yeah,
it's like you
right.
find out that
The overarching plot
yeah
was really good.
Yeah, they find out essentially that they're in a game.
That was awesome.
Yeah,
I really liked that.
Yeah, then they're also like being appeased. They're
What did they call those ancient deities? Like they had a term for them.
I don't think they called it. I think they just called it. No.
There was a name. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter. That was cool. though.
Essentially, yeah, there was like a virgin sacrifice
Yeah.
to those ancient deities, or else the world would end. Because it was like what? It was like a quasi like government organization
government
that was like
conspiracy
fucking
thing.
shit up. Yeah, that was pretty cool.
I really liked the Stoner character. I think that he was more than just a comic relief to he was a good character. He's probably
Yeah.
my favorite character, honestly. You had the token black guy. It played every horror trope so well.
Yeah, to a
it was
T, yeah.
so funny.
Even like the literal Cabin in the Woods based off the Evil Dead.
Mhm.
Like, it
you
was
want to talk about Evil Dead? The first act of the movie was Evil Dead.
yeah, honestly.
And it was done well.
Yeah,
you
even
know?
like the special effects, like in the beginning when they go to when they start to go up to the cabin in the woods and that bird hits that force field.
Yeah.
like that's pretty. It also turns the movie on its head because it's like you're expecting this like paper cutter horror movie. They go into the woods, they get scared, yada yada yada, and that happens. You're like, what the fuck's happening?
Right, it does.
Because there was never that in
I
the
went
trailer.
into that movie not expecting. I didn't expect anything. I
Yeah.
didn't know anything about it, and when I saw it, it was like, holy shit, this is really good.
Yeah. And then at the end, like all those like classic horror movie monsters are just like attacking
That was
everyone.
so cool.
Yeah, that was pretty
was
funny.
so cool.
Yeah.
The effects in that movie were phenomenal.
Oh,
the
yeah.
acting was pretty good. It was decent. The writing was good. It's just a good movie. If you haven't seen it, go see it.
Yeah.
There's not much else to say about it.
I'm pretty sure
but
it's on Netflix, and from what I understand, there seems to be like this just like outcry for a second one, which I don't know if it would.
I don't know
deserve
how
it,
I feel
but
about that. I don't know if I
don't
want
know.
a second one.
No, it's like one of those movies where it's like,
They'll need a second one.
yeah,
I
pretty
think
much.
it stands on its own pretty tall, and I don't see a reason for
No,
one.
I don't either.
I'm weird with sequels, though. Like, a lot of people really dig sequels, but I think those are the same type of people that can't handle closure or a movie standing on its own.
Now, do you mean sequels in general or like horror movie sequels?
I think all sequels. No, I'm not talking about like trilogy movies,
Yeah.
or like like a Lord of the Rings situation. But if someone comes up with an original concept for a movie, it has a beginning, middle, and an end. Why does it need another beginning, middle, and an end?
I don't know. I mean, like,
I can understand wanting to revisit characters.
in the terms of like, if you're looking at horror movie franchises like Scream,
Yeah.
that does it a lot well, very well. Excuse me. Because there's just other parts of that story that
Can be told.
be told, and in terms of Cabin in the Woods, I don't think it really needs to dig further because there wasn't character development per se.
Right, and there's not that many, like, all the tropes that they made fun of are still being used today.
Yeah, so it's
I mean, there's still more that they could pull from that well. It's certainly not a dry well, but
they could do like a found footage type thing.
Sure.
But I don't know.
I don't think that needs to be made. No. Doesn't need to be made. I'd see it, but they don't need to do that.
No.
I mean, even the Evil Dead sequels, I loved the second one. The third one I thought was just too goofy for me.
Yeah.
But, I mean, even remakes of movies, like the Evil Dead remake, I thought was all right.
I loved it.
I'm talking, like, remakes in general, though. Just beyond horror remakes. Most of them are bad. That fucking Total Recall remake, have you ever seen that?
It's... I did. Let's just put it that way.
Okay. It's not good,
No.
man. It's not good at all.
Even like with A-list actors like Bryan Cranston and Kate Beckinsale and Colin Farrell, like
sucks.
All that's good, but
It sucks.
yeah. I mean, it's a good movie on its own. There's really not much to say about it, and then it's really great. And like that was, in terms of us trying to make a list of horror movies to watch in October, I'd say that's definitely one of them.
That's definitely towards the top of my list.
If you're definitely thinking of something in between like Stranger Things binging, again, like it goes back to what I was talking about with Gerald's Game. Definitely, I think it's still on Netflix, right?
I'm pretty sure.
I think so too. But you can also pick it up at the DVD bin for like $5 because that movie came out like what 6 years ago, 5 years ago.
Still stands up.
Yeah,
and it holds up.
it really does.
Well.
It does hold up, and that's the good thing about a horror movie. If a horror movie stands up after 5 years, like
right. A lot of them, and that's sad to say, because you have these older ones like Romero films that are still great, and now you have stuff like even Saw that's starting to look dated.
Speaking of that fucking
Jigsaw, dude,
10th movie, is it 10?
It's fucking ridiculous.
Like, come on,
fucking ridiculous. I'm upset about Jigsaw because the release of that film pushed back God Particle, which I'm excited for.
Yeah,
I was really mad about it. I'm not gonna fucking see that movie.
No, it's not worth our time. I mean, it probably would be for a really good review or shitty review.
I don't know. I don't think I could sit through it.
Yeah?
I just hate those movies. I liked the first one, but everything after that was just
I'm 100% on board with you.
So, you picked a movie.
I did.
Let's talk about it.
I guess we get into that, huh? So I picked the Michael Bay produced version of Friday the 13th, made in 2009.
I had no idea that Michael Bay even made a Friday the 13th film.
I don't even think he probably did. He probably wrote the fucking check. He's just like, here, who cares? Go, do it. Honestly.
Were there any explosions?
No.
No explosions?
No.
So he definitely didn't make the movie. He just bankrolled the movie.
It's bad, man. It really is. Like, in the ethos of the Friday the 13th, like, horror, like, story, it's I don't even know what to think about it. Like, it's not, it doesn't hold up. The Metascore on Metacritic's 34, so that's
bad.
Yeah,
it's bad. It's a bad movie.
That's exactly what It's god damn, dude. Like in the terms of like when you were talking about it 2 episodes ago, you said that the beginning scene was so good that the rest of the movie was trying to keep up, and it did.
Yeah.
This one had a similar experience or similar feeling to it, but the rest of the movie was just so fucking shitty that it couldn't keep up with it. Like the beginning scene of like these 5 kids, they are tracking the GPS tracking of this weed stash. They contacted some dude on Craigslist for in the Camp Crystal Lake area, and they find it, and then they get murdered by Jason after hearing all these ghost stories that like it was in the area. So there was that, and then it was just bad. Like really, like there were some good kills, there were some really bad tropes.
What about the tits scene?
Oh yeah, there was a really so there's a tit scene in it that was really horrible. This girl's jet skiing has to be topless. I don't know why she wouldn't be.
To make it rated R.
Yeah, make it rated R, I guess. The guy that was driving the boat gets hit in the head from like literally probably like 30 miles away and with an arrow. So she falls, she biffs it really badly, and as she's wading in the water trying to like have him come and pick her up on the boat, he just hits her right in the head with the boat. And she sees Jason in her concussed stays. It's like, Jesus Christ. She swims to the bottom of this, like underneath a pier, to try to hide from him. And like there's just like shots of like Jason like walking on top of the pier while she's like looking above it, and it's just like she's gonna die. Like she's not getting out of this. Like it's I can see this coming from a mile away. What I didn't see coming from a mile away though is when she gets hit in the head with a machete, comes through the pier, hits her in the head. And then she she looked like a fucking popsicle. Like he literally picked her up, and like her tits just started bouncing up and down, and then blood just coming down. And I'm like, oh my god, this is so horrible. Like they didn't have to have that shot. They could have just stuck the machete in her head, and that's it. But they had to have that gratuitous tit shot. Like
ridiculous.
God damn it, Marcus.
So
who's the director? So yeah, I mean, if you're looking at fucking movies, you'll find that for maybe less than $5 at a DVD bin. I mean, you can find it on Amazon for $2.99. So that's exactly what I'd say about it.
About worth $2.99. So that's a brief review of Cabin in the Woods and Friday the 13th and Gerald's Game, which I highly recommend. Tune in next week for us bullshitting about Blade Runner for an hour.
And another pick of our Halloween series. Hopefully we'll have more to talk about.
All right, guys. Again, thank you for subscribing and listening. We really appreciate all the traffic we've been getting. And don't forget to rate us on iTunes.
Peace.